After a decade of constant high-alert survival, the body and mind reach a state of complete depletion. It feels like walking through thick mud. Every movement requires a massive, conscious effort just to stay upright. The fatigue usually traces back to a single moment of discovery, catching a partner in a secret betrayal that was hidden right in plain sight. But the initial shock is rarely what breaks a person. It is the years of quiet, persistent gaslighting that follow, a systematic effort to make the victim doubt her own senses until she no longer trusts her memory of the world. Her first instinct is to double down on the relationship. She tries to overgive, sacrificing her own needs and identity to nurture her partner, hoping that enough kindness will finally spark a change. In reality, pouring energy into someone who refuses to take accountability doesn't fix the bond. It only accelerates the erosion of the victim's sanity. As the isolation becomes unbearable, many women reach out to the only institutions they have left: counselors, religious leaders, or their local community. They are often met with a different kind of trauma. Well-meaning advice often boils down to a dismissal, telling the victim to just get over it, or suggesting that her own attitude is the primary obstacle to peace. This feedback treats her as a component in a social machine, expected to keep the family running regardless of her collapse. When leaders mirror his narrative, blame is externalized. She's trapped in an echo chamber where her pain is the problem. Traditional relationship advice assumes both people are acting in good faith. When applied to betrayal and abuse, that assumption makes the advice itself dangerous. The entire focus of the recovery must move away from the partner. You cannot stabilize a marriage by catering to the person who is actively destabilizing it. This is a matter of biological necessity. In an environment of constant betrayal, securing your own safety is the only way to keep your brain functioning well enough to make decisions. This realization marks the pivot. The victim stops trying to manage her partner's behavior and starts prioritizing her own mental survival. She carves out 20 to 30 minutes of fierce, uncontaminated solitude every day. This is her sanctuary, the one space where she can finally hear herself think clearly. As the external noise fades, her mental and spiritual instincts begin to return. She stops seeing the world through the lens of her partner's gaslighting. This isolation isn't a weapon used to punish the other person. It is the non-negotiable requirement for restoring her baseline reality. When a victim begins to set boundaries and protect her time, the immediate reaction from the partner is rarely support. It is usually a crisis. This is the kickback. As the victim's boundaries become more consistent, the partner's disruptive behavior spikes in direct opposition as he loses narrative control over her. The partner may escalate his anger or accuse her of destroying the marriage simply because she asked for space. He is testing the boundary to see if she will fold under the pressure. Holding a boundary during this phase is physically and emotionally exhausting. The urge to revert to being compliant, just to stop the conflict, can feel overwhelming. To navigate this, she uses weather checking. She assesses her partner's emotional state from a distance. If he is eruptive or defensive, she decides he is currently unsafe to engage with and calmly retreats. A hostile reaction to a new boundary is usually the clearest evidence that the boundary is working. Real transformation in these cases is measured in years, not weeks. It takes massive daily repetition to overwrite a decade of betrayal. There will be relapses and periods of total exhaustion. Rebuilding a sense of self is a slow, rhythmic process of developing new mental muscle memory. Eventually, the victim accepts a difficult truth. She still has no control over her husband. She cannot predict if he will ever choose to be healthy or honest. Surrendering the desire to control his outcome is what finally ends the paralysis. She can finally stop waiting for him and start living for herself. Today, she is no longer a person looking for external permission to be okay. She is anchored in her own worth and her own reality. This creates a unique form of freedom. She is now equally prepared to thrive within the marriage if it becomes healthy, or to thrive on her own if it doesn't. Waiting for an apology or change of heart keeps trauma in place. Healing begins when she stops looking for external permission to move forward. The goal was never just to save the relationship at any price. It was to become a person strong enough to define and protect her own life.